welcome back to another episode of Fireside Chat. Today, I think it's episode 21? No, 22. Last week was 21. I am joined here today by, obviously, Mr. Andrew Valkowskis, the owner, the creator, the lovely man, and also by Mr. Brian Neff. I hope I said that correctly. I really
You
hope.
got it. You nailed it.
I nailed it. So, the man.
No
we're gonna go ahead
silent
and-
consonants or anything?
No,
You should have
like
thrown
a
him for a
P
loop.
and a Z.
Like the F's are silent.
It's
no.
pronounced.
All my
Z.
ancestors are German, so we say all the letters.
Awesome. All right, and I'm Ken. I'm your host, your MC. Before we start, Mr. Brian, would you like to give us a little introduction about yourself? Tell us about your product. Just let us know about you. Let the viewers know.
Sure. I, as introduced, I am Brian Neff, legally middle named Fightmaster. Changed that when I was a young, more aggressive boy. But I am a freelance designer and developer. I largely these days work for Restoration Games, doing all sorts of projects. Return to Dark Tower, Thunder Road Vendetta, which we'll get to later, Unmatched. So a ton of fun there. And I've worked on a bunch of other projects. Big legacy projects are usually sort of my staple. So Betrayal Legacy was a game that I did a little while ago. And then I've done a couple of other projects with Hasbro, Betrayal at Mystery Mansion, that sort of stuff. I like to do sort of big narrative, bulky games where we do a lot of story and maybe some spooky stuff.
Thank you. Before we continue, I think you need to change the title on Twitch.
Oh.
Fireside. It says Valheim.
Absolutely
says...
right. Yeah. Fireside Chat.
Were you all playing Valheim earlier? Ooh, we got to talk about that later.
We actually play every Thursday, so that's our Thursday stream, where we just chat and build stuff and kill stuff and
talk about. I can show you around my Viking world a little bit later.
Absolutely. And
I want to talk about this other game too. I think it's called Lost Worlds that just came out. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's
no.
New World, that
New
MMO.
World. Yeah. New World. That's something I think Andrew, you would be interested in trying out. But anyway, that's a topic for a little bit later when we're going to talk about Valheim as well. So, since we are here now, I would like to know, how did you meet Andrew? It's always a question we ask everybody who comes on because we get a large variety of people. But basically, it's good to know the origin story of each other. So, how did you guys meet?
So I think it was Gen Con, and I believe it was 2014.
A long time ago.
God, that's 6 years ago now. Oh, my bones.
I think it was a double exposure hall, right?
Yeah, it was the double exposure hall, and you were running, I think, the intro scenario to Fate of the Norns for the very first time that I had ever seen it, but apparently you've been doing this for a while.
I think it was Lords of the Ash. We were doing the Immortals rules, and it was just an over-the-top adventure. Yeah.
And so I sat down, I played a game, and I had such a good time that I came back the next day. And this was before I was really working professionally. I was there just sort of making contacts and doing things like that. And Andrew ran such a good game that I was just like, oh, I'm going to come back tomorrow. And then I think you said, oh, hey, I have to go do something. Can you run this game?
Typical Andrew to do that. Yes.
And I did, and I had a great time. And so I bought a couple of the books, which I still have over here on my bookshelf. You can't really see it. It's over there on my tiny bookshelf.
Oh, cool.
And I have a copy that's still signed by you, Andrew.
That's one of our pitches, by the way.
I remember you and I went down to PAX South together, and you were running demos for me because I had to do sales because my sales guy couldn't make it to PAX South that year. I was doing sales. You were running the demo. You were running some necromancer adventure that you had come up with.
Yep.
And I remember we went down to, I think, almost no books, and there were people coming by trying to buy our personal copies. So I was wondering, did you sell your personal copy that PAX South or not? So I think I did. I think mine went.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so now that we know your backstory and how you met Andrew, it's funny because you just mentioned that you were a con goer, right? You weren't a game designer.
Mhm.
So how did you get into game designing, right? It's kind of unique that from going to be a convention goer to enjoying the game to now designing your own game, right? How did it go about from that?
So I started like my very first job out of college was working in video games. I was down in Texas. I was working for a company, a little known company called id. They did a game called Doom. So I was doing quality assurance on Doom, the 2016 game. And I was like, these hours suck. I hate crunch time. Like this is all bad. Not to talk anything bad about id. That company is great, but like every video game company is
Video
like
game
that.
companies, they'll
Yeah, you guys
squeeze you
spent
like a
all the
lemon,
hours.
basically. All the
Yeah, yeah,
hours,
yeah.
no pay.
Yep. And so I started going to conventions in 2013, and I was just like building up contacts and meeting people and doing all that sort of stuff. And then in 2016, right before Doom came out, I ended up getting let go. And I was like, okay, well, what if I just do? I had taken on a couple of little contracts, like doing rules editing and some things like that. And I was like, okay, well, what is it going to take to do this thing full time? And as it turns out, the first answer is being married to someone who can support you for about 6 to 12 months. And so for 6 to 12 months, I made almost no money. But my lovely, wonderful spouse, ended up paying all of our bills and doing all of that sort of stuff until I got a couple of breakthrough contracts, one of them being Betrayal Legacy, just doing a bunch of writing. And so I was writing a bunch of spooky stories and trying to come up with like as many horror movie references as I could jam into a box. I had my name on the front of that box, and that was sort of where it took off. And then about a year later, I started working most of my time at Restoration Games, working on Return to Dark Tower. And so like in between then, I've sort of fit projects in as I can. But that's really the sort of inroad that I had, was working with Justin Jacobson and Rob Davio, owners of Restoration Games. I did a couple of other projects for them, and they were like, "Oh, hey, you do great work. Do you want to come work for us? On everything else we do?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. Who says no to that?"
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And when you and I first met, you struck me as the kind of guy that likes these small box games. That's what totally surprised me when I saw your name on a big box game. Because you were always talking about these like really rules light, everything fits on one poker card, and away you go. Like, I think you were even spitballing a bunch of ideas at me. Like, oh, we should do an ice cream game truck or something. Like, it drives around and tries to sell as much ice cream in the neighborhood or something. I can't remember some madness you were pitching at PAX South that year. We went
Yeah,
together.
that game did end up getting made. It's called Food Truck Destruction Derby.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
And if you want to go to Drive Through RPG, you can be like the 9th or 10th person that's bought it.
Well, let's
So
put that into chat. Absolutely, let's put that into
And
chat.
link that on our YouTube video. Thank you, Mr. Editor. Aaron. But on that note, which one was the first game that you made on? Like, there was one you worked with someone else, but is there like one specifically that is your, like, what would you consider your first game? You know what I mean? Like your baby, right?
uh, so Food Truck Destruction Derby is the first game that has my name on it, but it's like
Okay.
barely a game. So I don't know that I would really consider that one my first game. I think like my first like thing that I put sort of my heart and soul into was Betrayal Legacy. Because it was sort of everything about like all of the cool stuff about playing a board game in like a big long story, with all sorts of bulk and bloat, and like it's not an elegant game. It's a big meaty like experience where you sort of go in and you tell a story about this family that has existed over 300 years in New England, and like sort of like every 20 years one of your ancestors comes and they die in this house, and then their aunt or their niece or nephew or son or whatever comes back 20 years later, and then they die in the house. And so it's this generational story of like this house that keeps on eating people. um and it was just a ton of fun to work on. The story for it ended up being incredible. um and just writing sorts of all sorts of weird creepy stuff in different time periods was an absolute joy to do.
That's awesome. Like, to be honest, like, I think anytime you can make your own game, especially one that's I feel like that's a very unique game. I'm very interested in it. We're gonna link all the stuff in the YouTube video down below description. But that being said, since you did mention that you also you currently work for Restoration
Restoration.
Games, right? What is your role in there, right? Like, I know you said you work on games. What do you specifically do?
So my official title at Restoration is I'm an in-house time traveler. Because Restoration Games sort of their thing is they take games from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they sort of put a new coat of paint on them, redo some of the rules, and then release them. So like Return to Dark Tower is based on the 1981 Dark Tower by Hasbro. Unmatched is based on Star Wars Epic Duels. And so like my job there is almost exclusively working on games that came out before I was born.
Restoration Games, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, hilarious. I love
Fireball Island, I remember
Fireball
seeing
Island,
that
yeah,
one,
is another good one. And so like it's really wild to like have to go back and like eBay like a copy of Fireball Island for research, that's like been sitting in someone's garage for 20 years. And I'm like, oh, no, I really need that. I can write it off on taxes. It's great.
Yep.
And that's my role is really to go in, play all the old versions, figure out what we can sort of salvage and what we need to design from scratch, and then working with our design team to sort of bring those rules out, do all of the prototyping, and I run a lot of the play testing too.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, if you compare it to like what Finn and Norn does, I mean, it's so different because we have to make new ideas, but I think it's equally as hard to make old games be innovative. So I think as a creator, that's such a unique thing.
because you have to bring the new elements that have been kind of developed around the whole what's it called, the Renaissance of the board game age, with the Euro invasion, things like limiting player elimination and things like that, more co-op, keeping player engagement around the table. So there's a lot of design elements that now have to get reincorporated into games that didn't really think about that originally. And I think that's very, very fascinating. It's a fun space to be in.
Yeah, I mean, as it turns out, like we've gotten a lot better at this in the past 30 or 40 years, and it's not that those games were bad. They were just different, and they were for a different audience, and they were for people who weren't into games like we are now. And I think it's like going back and playing old video games, right? Like if you go back and you play the old Legend of Zelda and things like that, like you can tell those games, they've aged. The graphics aren't as good. Some of the controls are a little sloppy because we've learned a lot. Doesn't mean that they're not great games. Doesn't mean that they weren't absolutely pivotal in their time. But it's important to sort of take those ideas and show what we've gotten to in the past 30 years.
Yeah, and it's come a long way. It's really come a long way, and I think a lot of things like I was going to mention. We caught up again at Metatopia. So this is a game designers convention in, where is it, New Jersey?
New Jersey.
Yep. And it's all these game designers that come together, whether it's role-playing games, board games, whatever, and everyone comes with their ideas, rough ideas, and they sit down and play with other game designers, and the other game designers critique the games in terms of giving them constructive criticism, in terms of where things are falling flat, where things could be trimmed, where things could be added, what could be refined. And I think I came there with Chronicle of Kings the last time you and I met, which was 3 years ago, pre-pandemic.
2017, 2018, yeah, it was certainly
maybe 2018, yeah. And so that one's still in the works. I mean, that was a big box game, if you remember. It was a very ambitious board game, which was Dynasties as well, where you're dealing with lineage of kings and queens, where every turn is 15 years, and you have to think about things in centuries rather than turns of like.
Yeah, I love it.
And so it's still in development. Well, it's still in testing and whatnot. But I found that whole community, the community that we're in, designers really prop each other up. I found I didn't find any jealousy, no one trying to tear anyone down, talking bad behind someone's back. Everyone's critique was very, very constructive. And when I was test playing other people's games, it was the same thing. Everyone's sitting there with a notepad, trying to take notes as they play, and at the end of the game, try to give the best possible feedback to the person that they're designing the game. And we're fortunate to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you pointed out something that's really interesting, and it's a thing that I love talking about, which is there's never been a better time to be playing games, than right now. And part of that is because we haven't given board games and role playing games to everybody that wants them. They just don't know that they want them yet. And so, our market is continuing to grow, and there's more and more people playing games every year. Kickstarter did, what was it, like $144 million last year.
A record,
Just
right?
a crazy amount of money, right? And that's because it's just more people who are playing games. And I think that's great, because it means that we haven't hit the cap on the number of designers that we can have. There's always we can always have more designers, we can always have more developers and more art people and more, like, so many talented people who come and do this stuff, and that's why, like you said, it's a renaissance, because there's just so many fantastically talented people who are coming in and being like, oh, let me put my spin on this thing, and let me bring my flair, and do the thing that I do really well. And that's sort of what I love about, especially going to Metatopia, is you meet all of these absolute characters, and you would never in a million years think that you would get those people in that same room. But you know we all play games, and we all make games, and we all have decided that, like, this weird thing that we do with pen and paper and cardboard is sort of worth our time, and that's fantastic.
And it's crazy. And I think it's at a time when people are realizing that video games, even though everyone thought they would overtake everything, people are lacking that face-to-face human interaction around the table. The more we go into the digital age, there's still that yearning of, let's get everyone together to, that's also part of the reason I think these board game cafes are springing up all over the place.
Yeah.
Like in Montreal, I think that there's a new one opening up every year or two. And there doesn't seem to be a limit in sight in terms of how many there could be. And there's all kinds of spins on them. Some of them are just like all gummy bears. Like, it's just, you go in there, it's all candy and board games. Other ones, it's just like a bistro and board games. Another one, it's a bar and board games. Yeah.
I got one of those right around the corner.
Oh.
Yeah.
And like, I can imagine the bank, the first bank, approached by this idea was probably like crazy, like, get out of my office. But now, I mean, it's like you can point to how many success stories in North America of these tabletop restaurateur type ventures that are successful. Just, there's no limit to that as well. It's crazy.
If there's anything that COVID showed us, is that people want human interaction, right? Being locked in for so long, people don't just want to stay in. And I feel like even before COVID, the last 5 years, the board game market has been growing and has not reached this plateau. It's booming to the point where people are like learning about board games. Obviously, it all starts off with these random board games, and then their friend shows them Catan, Dominion, or something like that, and then they jump into the rabbit hole, discover Kickstarter, and they kickstart every single cool game. Next thing you know, you get a board game that comes 2 years later. This is not personal experience. I'm just saying, this happened. It just happens. And then everyone is just so interested. And then the fact that matters is that there's so much creativity out there, right? You can make a board game about anything, and it just makes it so fun. So speaking of board games being created in Kickstarter, what are you currently working on? Is there anything you want to maybe give us a little insight right now of some games that you might be working out, or something that's releasing soon? Come on, give us something.
Yeah, I can. I'm actually really excited about this one. We just today launched a Kickstarter for Thunder Road Vendetta, which is our restoration of the 1986 Thunder Road by Milton Bradley. And I got to reach back to all of the cool American action movies that I saw when I was a kid, right? All of the Fast and Furious and Mad Max and like all of those things, where you have a car and there are guns strapped to your car, and you're driving around and you're trying to shoot everyone else, blow them off the side of the road, ram them into canyons, and then finish the race.
Awesome.
And that's sort of the elevator pitch for Thunder Road Vendetta.
I'm gonna link that in the comments down below. I think it's the
chat.
one.
Yeah,
in the chat and the comments down below. I put it in the chat as well for those who are interested.
It made me think of two things when you given me the elevator pitch. I don't know if you looked at them. There was Car Wars back in the 80s. Was an RPG about cars.
Yep. I've definitely played some Car Wars.
Okay, and the second one was a video game called Carmageddon, where you actually
Definitely played some Carmageddon.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Absolutely, where you like drive over all the little pixelated people.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Somewhere in the 90s. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I played all of that stuff growing up. Twisted Metal was another good one. Vigilante 8. Those types of games where it's just big action explosions and driving over ramps while a missile goes underneath you, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And that's really what we tried to tap into for Thunder Road Vendetta. So it's a very, very American game where you have a big handful of dice, you roll a bunch of dice, and then you put your dice on your cars, and that's how they move. And then you can shoot people. If you shoot them, there's their gas tank might explode, or you might flatten one of their tires, or give their driver a concussion, and they'll sort of drive around the road into a wall. Um, and it's a huge chaos engine, because we've had turns where it's like, oh, I slammed into your back and that caused you to skid underneath this tanker truck, and then that tanker truck rammed you into a mine, and that hit your gas tank and you blew backwards and then landed on top of my large car and then rammed my large car into a wall and eliminated my car. And
did you guys look at Rollmaster Crit Fail tables for that?
Absolutely. That's sort of like the vibe that we ended up going for, was like, what's the worst thing that can happen if your car gets shot? And it's like, oh, your airbag fails and just kills your driver.
Nice.
I did not think about that. I'm gonna be real. I never expected that to. That's pretty funny. Okay, so you're the lead designer on this game, right?
I'm a developer.
Okay, developer. Sorry, lead developer.
Rob and Justin are the lead designers on that,
Okay.
and Dave Chalker and Brett Myers are the other two designers.
Okay, so give us, for people like me, what do you do as a lead developer in comparison to like lead designer? Just give us like a quick.
So as a lead developer, largely what I'm doing is I'm looking at games that are already designed.
Okay.
So I have Brett and Dave were the two designers originally, who had this idea, and they came and they pitched it to Restoration. And Restoration was like, yes, this is great. We'd love to do all the art for this and the production and make it happen. And so my job is to take something from an idea and make it into a product. So making sure that we have an audience that we can sell to, making sure that the rules all make sense, making sure that it all fits into a box, what components we're using, all that stuff is my job. Because I think sort of rightly so, designers are very sort of head in the clouds, right? Like, they're not worried about how much a game costs to make, and they shouldn't be, because they need to make this really cool idea and make the game the most radical thing it could possibly be. And then my job is to sort of attach a string to that balloon and figure out how we actually put that in a box that's worth the money that we're charging people for it. And so it is a lot of playtesting, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of talking with manufacturers and figuring out how much stuff costs and that sort of stuff, which isn't the like glamorous part of game design, but it's like the part of getting it done.
Very important. Oh my god, is that important? Especially now. Oh my god, all the prices are changing and supply chains are changing. I got an import that's inbound right now, and oh my god, every day there's something happening.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 30,000 copies of Return to Dark Tower that are just stuck on boats.
So game design is just like, oh, I have an idea, and then the developer is like, is it possible for this idea to work?
Yeah.
Right. And together it makes a product, which is I love that. So what else have you been lead developer on? Because I feel like this is probably not your first rodeo when it comes to lead developing. Is there any other games you want to talk about? Tell us what are the games you may have done, and give us a little quick rundown.
So an ongoing project that I work on is a little game called Unmatched, and I love it because it is a 2-player. This is one of those small box games that you were talking about, Andrew. It's like a 2-player head-to-head card battling game. So you have 2 minis. You get a board and you sort of maneuver around the board, and you play cards in order to reduce your opponent from whatever their starting life total is down to 0. And we have picked both open source characters and licensed characters. So we've got King Arthur and Medusa. We have Beowulf, and Little Red Riding Hood. So all of these sorts of open IP characters. And then a couple of years ago, we got approached by Mondo, who does a bunch of licensing, and they were like, "What about this, but Jurassic Park?" And we were like, "Yes, we love it." So we've got we've got Muldoon and the Velociraptors, and just recently we announced that we got the Marvel license. So that's always sort of been a bucket list thing of mine, is to work on a Marvel property.
That's big.
So we've got
that's hot.
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
That's really hot.
Oh, I love it.
It's really hot.
Hot. Wicked hot.
It's
hot.
just really
It's
good to be like how does Daredevil work in this game? Ooh, send shivers down my spine.
Okay, so you've done a lot, right? So speaking of that, we all know that it's difficult when it comes to just game designing, game development, all that stuff. What is some of the hardest stuff you may have that you have, like road bumps? Like what something that was tough to kind of overcome? Like what did you learn, right? Obviously, you've done this for a few years now, so I'm sure you have few lessons you can teach, the viewers. And
Funny
stuff
anecdotes from the beta
Funny
testing,
anecdotes.
especially beta testing. Oh my goodness, those always come up with some funny ones.
Oh yeah, play testing is part of my favorite. The one thing that I've learned, throughout every game that I've ever worked on is you have a group of playtesters, and they're simultaneously way smarter and way dumber than you are, and they'll see things that you never would have thought about, and then they'll just ask the dumbest questions sometimes. And the important thing is like, they're not wrong. Like, can I attack someone who's not on the board anymore? No. I didn't know we had to make that a rule, but apparently we do. And it's always really interesting to sort of get that feedback. Can it my favorite one that we got for Thunder Road was like, "Hey, can I shoot my own cars?" We're like, "Why would you want to do that?" And they're like, "Oh, I had this really cool thing that I was going to do where I was going to blow up my own gas tank and shoot my car over the finish line." And I was like, "Oh, that is pretty cool. Yeah, of course you can shoot your own cars." And so it's always, play testing is always more important than you think it is, especially when you first start out, is make sure to get it in front of as many people as soon as you can.
Okay, and how about early design? So when you're looking at what kind of mechanics you're going to wrap your concept in. So when you look at your big ones like a horror theme, or an island with fireballs, or a race car game, what's your process to go from theme to list of mechanics that would wrap around that and deliver that?
So whenever I have an idea like that, the first the answer that I try and get to as quickly as possible is, who is this for? Because like we were talking about earlier, audiences are always growing, and not all games are for everybody, and that's okay. And so figuring out who your game is for answers a lot of your questions going forward. How complicated can I make this game? Well, who's it for? Is this theme, too bloody or too gory or whatever? Totally depends on who it's for. There's never any right or wrong answers whenever it comes to that sort of stuff. We've sort of developed some best practices over the past couple of years, but we break them all the time. Like you were talking about player elimination. Like, people don't like player elimination, but I've worked on 3 games with player elimination in the past year just because it works for who the game is for. And then sometimes it doesn't. If your game is 4 hours long, you don't want to eliminate someone in the first hour because then they're making pizza rolls for 3 hours, and that's not fun. But in a 25-minute game that's for kids, absolutely, it's super worth it. And so I think, answering some of those high level questions, and the very first one is, who am I making this game for? How old are they? What do they like? What other games are like my game? That sort of thing. Answering those questions really early really helps get you sort of in the groove of, these are the things that I can do, and these are the things that are off limits.
Okay, and then when you go into the next iteration, we start looking at things like, okay, am I going to be using cards for drafting, or a dice pool example with the cars? What would be some of the considerations that you'd be looking at as a...
That, I think, is where it sort of gets muddy. That's sort of when I end up becoming more of a shotgun than a scalpel, where it's like, let's try everything, and getting it onto a table, and just playing it as soon as possible, is the next thing. You can you can ideate and you can come up with new ideas all day, and you can do that forever, you know. But none of those ideas survive first contact with the table. And so as soon as you get it to a table and as soon as you start playing it, you'll know. Like, you'll know whether or not it works or it doesn't. And then once you find a thing that works, you move on to the next thing that works and on to the next thing. And anything that doesn't work, cut it, leave it on the floor.
I think those are good advice for anybody who is starting into like game development and stuff like that. Especially the playtesting. I feel like the hardest part about playtesting is getting people, but different variety of people, because you can't just get only gamers. You have to try a different variety. See if you get older
Sure.
people, younger people. You get some people who've never played games before, people who specifically play games. So that you get such a huge variety. And obviously, I think when you're starting out, that could be the hardest part, because you just get your friends in the beginning, right? Maybe you go to a forum, you can get some people lucky, which
And
is
then
good advice.
Yeah, it's a like-minded echo chamber, and that's dangerous too, right?
Exactly.
And so the moment of truth really comes down to when the designers step out of the room with a group of players that have never played the game before.
And that's always scary.
We did that with Vanguard, and I remember it was live streamed to the developer and the publisher. Like, we're all sitting there watching these players play, and we're yelling at the screen like, no, the rules like right there, just read the next paragraph. And they're just trying to figure it out, and they're like, what do we do next? Like, how does this work? Did you draw this, and do I play that? And that is where the rubber hits the road.
Yep.
And really, that step cannot be missed. You can't just play with your friends and say, all right, code complete, let's ship this to the printer. You really do need to go through that step of faces that you've never seen, and developers are nowhere to be found to handhold anyone at the table.
Yeah. It's like I said, I'd rather have friends that give me opinions. Like, let's say, like, whenever because I make videos for a living, and I ask my friends, like, what do you think about this video? If all my friends go, oh, it's perfect, it's fantastic, it's not what I want. I want them to tell me, like, oh, I didn't like this part, I didn't like this part. You know, you get criticism, you can learn from your mistakes and experience and change it. You don't want everything to be perfect in quotation mark, when in fact it's not. It's just perfect for them because you don't want to hurt your feelings. You want your feelings to get hurt, that you can work on it. So I love that so much. Speaking of that, I think we've got a little. Is there anything else I'm thinking when it comes to maybe game development, stuff that people might want to know? I think you've pretty much given
some
all
of
the
those
tips.
points are good for game designer.
Yeah,
I think like
exactly.
anyone who's watching as a game designer, there is that analysis paralysis where it's, you know, when is it perfect? Like, did I land that perfect mechanic? And so even before getting to testing, I know a lot of like green game designers here around Montreal that have been working on their same game for 6, 7, 8,
Right. Yep.
and it's still not ready for beta testing because they're at that point of, oh, it doesn't feel right. Oh, I think I'm going to go back and change that mechanic, and it just keeps coming back, and they're spinning their wheels in the mud. And I like your approach of just like, listen, just prototype something, throw it to the table, and you're going to know if it floats or it's right away.
Yep. Yeah, it's a thing that one of my old design partners always used to tell me, which is like, games are never finished, they're just done. You know, nothing is ever perfect. There's no such thing as a
Yep.
perfect game.
Yep.
You know, and so the best thing that you can do is fail as quickly as you can and then move on. You know, and always fail forward.
That's very good. Absolutely. And I think the other aspect is the visual. So we haven't talked about, you know, the aesthetic, the visual aesthetic, art. So on the projects that you've worked with, I mean, they're big box projects, art budget.
Yeah.
Have you
We
been in the
try to.
process? Have you been in the process of selecting artists or doing art briefs in terms of, you know, what kind of artwork needs cards, the board, etc.?
I've done some art briefs, but largely we at Restoration we actually have a dedicated art team. Lindsay Davio and Jason Taylor, both incredible art directors and production people, that sort of make sure that everything gets over the line, and, you know, wizards within design and all of that sort of stuff. And they have a Rolodex of just fantastically talented artists. You know, and so whenever anyone asks me, you know, who's an artist that you'd like to work on your game, I'm like, whoever Jason and Lindsay want, get them to do it, because they know that's their area of expertise. You know, but as far as being involved in the process, yeah, absolutely. You know, I love seeing sketches and you know, first colors and first inks and all of that sort of stuff, and saying like, you know, oh, this needs to change a little bit, or this doesn't quite capture the feel of what we're going for. You know, and that sort of collaborative process is super important, you know, working in a team. And I'm really lucky to be working with a team that's open to that sort of collaboration, you know, where they'll come back and they'll say, you know, well, artistically this looks great, but is it the feeling that you're looking for? And you know, we're really lucky that, you know, we'll tell them yes sometimes, we'll tell them no sometimes, and when we tell them no, they're like, okay, great, tell us what you need, we're gonna turn this back around to an illustrator, they're gonna work on it, you know. And you know, we get a lot of comments about how good the art is in a lot of our games, and a lot of it is because of sort of that process where we have game designers and game developers who are in, you know, in the art room, you know, sort of looking over artists' shoulders, saying like, this is good, this needs some work, this is very good, you know, and being able to say this is the feel that we're going for.
Well, that was one of the things that struck me. Like right before we went live, you sent me the pick for Thunder Road, and like I was just wow, I love the aesthetic, absolutely love the aesthetic. So that carries through the entire thing. I love that diesel punk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, same thing with Fate of the Norns. That's one of the things that we really try to do is get that kind of really old world aesthetic. And so when I sit down at like Metatopia or you know Double Exposure at Gen Con or what did they do at Toronto? I forget now. The Breakout.
Breakout or yep.
Yeah, Breakout.
Yeah,
They end up having also the game designers there. Is I also try to give them have little categories, and there's always one category for art. I take a look at the prototype, and I'm like, is this the finished prototype, or you know, like, have you thought about your budget for art? Where are you going to put your focus on art? Because I ended up getting some advice early on when I started, and someone in the RPG industry told me very wisely said, you have the very best game in the world, but if you've got terrible art on the cover, no one's going to discover your game.
Yep.
If you have a terrible game, beautiful art, you'll make some sales. The best is you get both. Make sure you've got both. But that's how important art is. Like he just drove that point home, and so it's really important for anyone as well. Like watching. Oh, and I think I met your boss Rob at Breakout too. That's a funny anecdote.
Yeah,
very funny anecdote. Yeah, we were sitting at a table. I didn't even know it was him. I had never met him before. There was like four of us test playing someone else's board game, and we played one game, and he and I, there was like a Western cowboy game. We kind of pushed the envelope of us being like outlaws, bad guys. Like we're like, can we like, you know, rob stagecoaches and stuff? And oh, I hadn't thought of that. And can we have like a gun shootout on the street? He's like, I hadn't thought of that. And he's scribbling wildly. And so, you know, we're kind of like, you know, on the same wavelength. You know, there's four of us playing and whatever. So we're setting up for the second game. And so everyone's kind of like introducing themselves. And I go, you know, who are you? He goes, oh, Rob Theobald. Like, okay, what do you make? And the other two guys just, how do you not know this guy? You know, like, it's gasp. And I'm like, oh, crap. Is this someone I'm supposed to know? Because I'm just so busy, like, just designing RPGs and stuff. Like, I don't have time to look at every single, like, designer out there. So I'm like, sorry, I don't. And he goes, have you heard of the Legacy board games? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he goes, yeah, that's me. And I'm like, hell yes, awesome, amazing. And then I start going like, you know, I'm who makes like Fate of the Norns. He goes, yeah, the Viking guy. You do all the Fate of the Norns Ragnarok RPG stuff. And I'm like, how the hell do you know me? And he goes, I got a couple of guys on staff. We were talking about doing a Viking game at one point, and they pitched you as the consultant.
Yep, definitely did do that. Yeah, Rob's great. You know, he's super down to earth guy. He's been doing game design for 30 years now, right? You know, he worked at Hasbro in the 90s and you know, that sort of stuff. And so like just a wealth of experience, absolutely great, down to earth guy. Worked on 1,000 projects, and some of them are legendary, and the other ones you've never heard of, you know, and that's how it is, you know, when you do this as a career.
Yeah.
Is like you have your hits and they take off and people remember those and nobody remembers anything else. Which is great because, you know, I get to bury games like Food Truck Destruction Derby.
No. We're gonna boost your sales like crazy after the stream. You're gonna be like, the sales have doubled tonight.
Doubled. Twice as many in the past 4 years.
Wow. I do agree with art. I think for me personally, I think my number one thing is artwork, or not specifically it has to be pretty, it has to be captivating, right? And even my field as well, you want to get something that's clickbaity, right? Something that attracts people to come and watch, and that's one of the most important thing. And you would hate for someone to not perform well because they don't have that clickbaity artwork, that box that looks good. But on that note, I feel like we've done everything that we've talked about when it comes to game designing. Let's talk a little more personal stuff. I have here in my notes that you're into professional wrestling.
We get to start
right
having
here.
the conversation.
Now we're gonna talk about that in video games. So we talked about the serious stuff, about all the you know, the game design and all that cool fun stuff. But now we're going to the even cooler fun stuff. So who's your favorite wrestler? Like, I haven't watched wrestling recently, but you know, for me, like back in the days, you know, you had The Rock, The Undertaker, and all that stuff. But who's your favorite wrestler now?
So I've been an avid viewer of professional wrestling for since I was 5. I was watching WCW in 1995.
Oh man.
And I've
stopped.
They're like, oh. Oh my goodness.
Oh man, but you know, much like there's never been a better time to play video games, there's also never been a better time to start watching professional wrestling. And it's because for years and years and years, the only company that was doing professional wrestling in any sort of serious way was World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in 2019, a man by the name of Tony Khan, who also owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, put a bunch of money into starting his own promotion called All Elite Wrestling. And they're the alternative product, and their wrestling is incredible. And their current world champion, named Kenny Omega, fine Canadian product, Kenny Omega, from Manitoba, Canada. And he's incredible. He's the best wrestler in the world.
Crazy. I started watching in the 80s. My favorite was Randy Macho Man Savage.
Randy Savage.
And the last time I watched, I think, was WrestleMania. I don't even remember which one it was. It was Ultimate Warrior versus Randy Macho. That was
WrestleMania 3.
Yep. No, it wasn't 3, was it?
WrestleMania 3 or WrestleMania 4. I'm pretty sure.
Single digits, Andrew.
Single digits.
Think about it that way. Single digits, all right? Yeah,
I we're on WrestleMania 36 now, yeah. 37.
No, it can't be. Because wasn't the first one with Andre the Giant? Second was like Mr. T.
Yep.
Yeah. Third one was
oh man. No man, maybe. I don't know. Jeez. Gotta look that up. When was that?
I watched it before it was WWE. I think it was WWE.
It was WWF. It never got to WWE.
Yeah. For me, yeah. It was WWF, and then they changed it, and I was like, what is this?
Oh, could it be? It had to be at least 6 or 7.
6 or 7?
Yeah.
It might be. It might have been. So Randy
like
Savage.
90, maybe 90? Could have been 1990.
Oh, WrestleMania 1990 would have been. Hold on, I'm on the Wikipedia page.
That's almost 33 years ago, Andrew. So that could have been very, very, very possible.
This is why I'm so out of touch with wrestling.
Honestly, if it was 1990, it probably was the third one or the fourth one. I mean, it could have been.
Where's George the Animal Steel, man?
Yeah, April 2nd, 1989, WrestleMania 5.
There we go, 5. Okay, you were closer than I was.
Yep, in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Oh my!
There you go.
That says, "Oh my!" That was a while.
Yeah, it was a decent long time ago. But you know, don't let any wrestling fans know that I said this because they'll get really mad at me. But all of the best wrestlers come from Canada.
Yes, 100%.
100% of the best wrestlers come from Canada. Bret the Hitman Hart, Roddy Piper, all of them, Canadians, all of them.
You know,
well, in Quebec there was a like a whole school of them came out of Quebec. Like
Yeah,
the
the,
Rusher
the, the
brothers, they had their own school of wrestling, and they were exporting talent. Same thing with Alberta. Yeah, the Hearts came out of Alberta.
yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, it's just there's some really really mean people up in Canada as far as wrestling goes.
Well, we live in the cold all the
People,
time.
yeah, people that'll hit you with chairs and not think twice about it.
Wait, we're not supposed to hit you that hard? Oh, my bad. Wait, wait a minute. Wait.
There's a very famous hardcore wrestler who retired just a couple of years ago when into his 50s, which is bananas to me. He's been wrestling since he was like 22. His name was Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh yeah, the guy with the razor blades on his fingers.
Yeah, razor blades on his fingers.
Yeah.
He's from Saskatchewan.
Didn't he give someone HIV or something? Or
Probably he's probably given tons of people tetanus too.
yeah. Oh my god.
The rusty fingers.
Yeah, what he would do, like his shtick was bloody matches. So like later on, they would use chairs to maybe cut someone open, but here he would have like little razor blades hidden away in like his sports tape on his wrist or on his fingers, and he'd pull it out and he'd like slice someone's forehead open. And on the forehead, there's like a lot of arteries and stuff, and he just pours. And then they just go to town on each other and just blood everywhere.
That was the crimson mask, as they say in the business.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I feel like he's still around. I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah,
he gave me nightmares when I was young. Like
his gimmick later on was he used to cut people open with a fork. He used to take a fork to the ring and then just jam it into people's foreheads.
That is
wrestling's wild.
That is insane. Like a razor blade, it's just like a fork is like.
Yep.
But I saw
it's got a cut.
I want to say Johnny Knoxville or someone ended up doing some sort of expose on some sort of wrestling. Maybe I'm sure in the South, like maybe South Carolina or somewhere, where they've got this extreme wrestling where all the ropes are barbed wire. They drop thumbtacks all over the floor, and they come at each other with clubs wrapped in barbed wire or something.
Yep. So actually, funny that you should mention. That's sort of extreme death match is sort of what the moniker for it is.
Okay.
And actually, just at Origins, a couple of weeks ago, we went out to Origins, and one of the people who was helping us at our booth was like, "Hey, they're doing an extreme death match out in the woods, like an hour outside of Origins. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And we watched, and man, it was brutal. It was like people getting put through doors, and like there were panes of glass and fluorescent light tubes and all sorts of stuff. And like those people, you could not pay me enough money to do that. But like they get, it's those daredevils. Yeah, it's like it's the same people who are like jumping the Grand Canyon and like doing destruction derby and all of that sort of stuff. It's just like
that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even think I could watch that either. I'd be like, my face would just be like this the whole time. I'd be like.
I think this is where we merge both topics. So, when is your wrestling board?
Oh no. I haven't started designing it yet.
You have to though. You have to. You have to.
It's gonna get there for sure. Wrestling, as it turns out, it's really hard to make a board game out of wrestling. There's a lot of people who have tried, but like. There's role-playing games actually tend to do much better doing what wrestling is, because like wrestling is two different things, right? It's a sport, but it's a scripted sport,
right?
And so it's also just a play, right? And so you have people who are like writing stories for wrestling, and then these incredibly talented acrobats who are coming out and like pretending to hurt each other, and you have people who are who like have practiced their entire lives to just fall onto plywood from 20 feet. And like, that's their thing. Right. And they can do it without getting hurt. And it's fantastic. And that's why they've had a job in wrestling for forever. It's because you can just throw them onto tables or whatever from any height and they're fine.
Doesn't add up. I think Hulk Hogan said he totally regrets the leg drop because every time he dropped on his butt, he was compressing his spinal cord, and in the end, he lost like 4 inches of height or something over his career.
No.
Yeah.
Oh no.
He was like, I
Yeah,
wish I
I
would have
mean-
chosen a different finisher. He goes, that one just killed me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are people who will wrestle into their 50s. Sting is still wrestling, and Sting is 63.
Oh my! Do they
And
come in
that's
with walkers?
no, he's taking pile drivers. He looks like he's in his 30s. And part of it is just because like people are really good at like making sure that they don't hurt the people that they're working with.
That's
Yeah.
important. That's important.
Mhm.
That's the art,
That's
I think.
important.
That's the art and the science.
Yeah,
Okay, so I know we can talk about wrestling almost all night.
forever.
Let's go to our last topics, video games, since we did bring it up early, and we wanted to talk about it. So you mentioned you play Valheim. Andrew plays Valheim. Go talk.
So we started the stream, both of these, Tuesday and Thursday, after GaryCon. So we kind of we missed each other. We just hanging out. And GaryCon was the first really big virtual convention, all did together. We said, let's just stay in touch. So we decided to stream twice a week. Tuesdays, we figure we'll all get together. We'll invite someone we don't know or we know and we haven't seen in a while as a guest. And we will just chat and drink and have a good time. And then Thursdays, we'll all pick a video game, Viking based, because I mean, that's our audience. We will play it together, see where the evening takes us.
It's been only Valheim.
It's
though,
been
so
only
far.
Valheim.
It's only been Valheim. We said Viking-based games, but we've only done Valheim.
Oh, I have a new Viking.
We're almost
game for
there.
you.
We're almost there. We just got to the meadows, so we started the tech tree in the meadows. Which I think is the last biome.
Yep. It's
So
the
we
last
just
one
got
that's
there.
currently in there. And boy, have you run into the death skeetos yet?
Oh yeah. We killed the skeetos. We killed the little goblin guys. The feelings.
Fearlings.
Yeah, those big mammoths are the ones that are giving us a little bit of trouble, and the oozes, or the tar pit oozes, are the worst.
Those are new.
Oh,
those weren't in the game until they just did their recent like Hearth and Home update. Those are brutal. I was playing with a friend of mine, and we ended up like running away from a group of oozes into one of the like goblin towers, and they were just like, no, this is ridiculous, and shot their ooze and knocked down the entire tower, and the whole tower fell down, and we all died there, and all of our bodies were just sort of like buried in rocks. That game's great.
We had many evenings like that. There was one where we got to, this is the first time we got to our ice biome, and we found the tallest mountain, I think, on the entire generated island, and it just basically went from beach to tallest mountain immediately. It was just sheer cliff. And we said, let's not look around for an easier way. We're just going to like work our way up. And we got up there, we found a tower right on the edge of this cliff. We said, hey, this is a great place to build a base. And that place was the place of so many deaths, of falling down the cliff, of like the boss coming and going like, I want to destroy your base and make holes in all the floors that you made overhanging this cliff. You guys can like try to run away from me and fall to your deaths. Oh, there were a lot of laughs had. Oh,
Lemmings over the Vikings. Yeah, there was just our first venture into the plains was one of my favorite times, because like we were not ready for it at all. We found it way before we even found the mountain, so we had no idea the order that we were supposed to go in. And so we were like, oh, plains seems really cool.
Yeah.
So we built a portal, we built a little hut around our portal, and then like stepped outside the portal, and we were like, I'm gonna breathe in the plains air, and then a mosquito came and just killed me in one shot. And like I was so dead, but I was just far enough away from a portal that like I needed someone to come help me get all my stuff back. And so I remember like I like came outside, saw the Desquito rolling around, ran back inside, and like sort of just crouched in a corner, and I was like, Patrick, I really need your help to come in. I just need to get my stuff back. And then like we ran outside, and I was like, Patrick, distract it. And then like Patrick ran over, and he immediately got killed. And then I ran over and I grabbed my stuff, and I got closer to the portal, and then I died again. And it was like a 2-hour process of like inching our dead bodies back towards the portal to get all of our stuff back in.
Some sessions can be so gruelingly painful. And there were some players that are just cursing, like, I'm giving up on this game. Uninstall. I'm done. And then they're back next week. All right, so
Yep.
what are we doing this week?
Yep. Yeah, the our sort of claim to fame in Valheim is we were one of the first people on the Viking space program. Which is a fun little glitch you can do in Valheim, and I think you can still do it. Which is you build a door, and then you build a 45-degree ramp that goes up like 9 or 10 different different stories.
Want to fall? Doesn't go to
you
red?
have to prop it up,
Okay.
right? You have to put posts under it and make sure that it doesn't fall. And then you make a harpoon, and you harpoon someone. You harpoon a player, and then you have them close the door, and then you walk away from the door so they're stuck on the door, except for the harpoon sticks to them. And so you walk directly behind this really, really long ramp that you've made, and then whenever you're far enough away, they open the door and they shoot off the end of the ramp.
No.
And then you let them go, and you can send them miles and miles away.
I love it. We're gonna have to try that.
Excellent. So much fun.
That sounds so fun. Okay, you were mentioning this other game. We're not talking about the same one, right? Are we talking
what's
about
the
New
other
World,
game?
or are you
No,
talking about another one?
So I actually haven't played New World, and if you've
Okay.
played New World, I'm curious about your opinions on it.
Yeah, what do you think?
I have not, but I heard it's really good. I haven't.
What
it's
is
like
it?
it is a Viking MMORPG basically. I don't know the exact.
Does that
premise.
have a monthly fee, or is it like Guild Wars? Buy it once and play
I
forever?
believe it's buy it once and you play forever.
Yeah,
That's what I believe.
it was like Amazon Studios.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's their first release.
Yeah.
You
It's
play
an MMO.
for free with Prime or something?
I'm not
I think
100% sure.
you probably can.
Yeah, you probably get a
Probably
discount if you have
subscribe
Prime,
to
to be
Prime,
honest. Yeah. Yeah, but that's something we'll have to look at. But what's the game that you wanted to mention to Andrew?
So came out just this year, just in February of this year. Absolutely game of the year this year. It's called Tribes of Midgard.
Rings a bell.
Tribes of Midgard. It's excellent. It is a it's a 10-player game. So you can play solo or you can play with up to 10 people.
Don't mind me
and
opening Steam here.
Yeah.
Stream bag.
And everybody spawns and there's a village in the middle.
Okay.
And the world tree is growing in the middle of the village, and you have a blacksmith and an armorer and all these people who are hanging out in this village. And you have to go out and collect wood and stone and metal to sort of build up your reserves. And then at night, the hell things, they come and they attack your village.
Okay.
So you have to defend your village at night and then go out and adventure during the day. And then every 2 or 3 days, a Jotun will spawn, and it'll just start walking towards your village. And if it gets to your village, it destroys your world tree.
Yikes.
And so the whole game is like you're defending your village, and then you're running out and you're like building things. There's some light crafting. You get better weapons and you get better armor, and you're trying to take down these enormous giants. And it really is like it's a team effort where it's like, oh, I spotted a giant. It's about a day away. All 10 people just pile on this thing and start whacking it, and then the Jotun will like stomp its foot and kill 2 people, and you have to go and like revive your other 2 people while everyone else is dealing damage. It's so much fun.
It looks really fast paced. I'm looking at the trailer and mostly positive reviews. So probably
it looks good. Yeah, it looks good. All right, once you're done that, Andrew, you know what we're playing.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I mean, Vikings are still hot. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
a hot market forever.
God of War.
Evergreen. And Celtic, like Germania has now launched as like a new series on Prime or Netflix. The Celts hopefully the Celts heat up because Children of Aerie was about to launch. So print proof. There is a mysterious book
right there.
It's too dark, Andrew. We can't see.
Just turn the lights on. I like it. No.
Turn the lights on. Turn the lights on.
Gotta turn them down.
Dim them. Dim those lights.
We went to Andrew's house like about a week and a half ago, and we're recording. And this is the type of lighting that I like having, like 3-4 lights and stuff. Andrew's like, I will have 1 light bulb in the corner, please. And I was like, Andrew, you can't do it. So then we put on the lights. He's like, all right, sunglasses. I'm like, oh my god. He had sunglasses on. But anyway, we are getting to our hour mark. Thank you for joining us today. Is there anything else you would like to say before we head out? Anything else you want to shout out? Maybe some socials, maybe some other products or anything like that. Let us know right now.
So if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Twitter at MurderKnuckles. And I don't do Instagram or TikTok or anything like that, so Twitter is really the best place to follow me. I mostly just post updates about the stuff that I'm working on, so if you're interested in my opinions about things, you just sort of have to at me directly, and I'm happy to talk to you. And if there are any aspiring game designers or in the chat and you had something useful, feel free to sort of hit me up, and I'd love to talk to you about whatever you're working on.
Awesome, buddy. We got to catch up in person real soon.
All right.
Till next time, everyone.
Skål!
Skål.
Grab a drink. Skål.
Let's go.